My favorite part of house sitting is reading people's diaries. Like my latest gig, the Wrights. Mid-40s, married 2 years, they weekend in Malibu once a month, which gives me plenty of time to snoop around. Thought I'd hit the jackpot. The last 5 entries in Miss Wright's diary read like a Mexican telenovela. She married her husband for money, no surprise there. The house was frigging gigantic, and it wasn't long before their relationship soured. Unfortunately, Mr. Wright's lawyers had drawn up a snazzy prenup, so she was stuck. For the next few months, she documented the decay of their marriage. In the brief moments I spent with them, I noticed snarky comments and scornful glances. They secretly hated each other. Miss Wright's entries became more and more aggressive, until finally one ended with, "Sometimes I just want to kill my husband." Spicy, I thought, munching popcorn while spread out across their king-sized bed. You can imagine my reaction when Mr. Wright had his accident a few weeks later. There was a fault with the brake line on his Ferrari. Apparently. I was suspicious, but had 2 problems. First, I'd no evidence Miss Wright was actually involved. And second, I couldn't reveal what I knew without basically admitting to half the neighborhood I read their diaries. So I hatched a plan. Sooner or later, Miss Wright would need a house sitter. Confessing to a murder in her diary would be pretty stupid, but maybe I'd find something the police could use. Then I'd say I only read it because I was already suspicious. 6 weeks later, I got the call. Of course, Miss Wright, I'd be happy to house sit. I waved her off and then dashed into the bedroom. She'd switched hiding places, but I eventually found the diary at the back of her walk-in closet. Surprisingly, there'd only been 1 entry since my previous visit. It read, "I killed my husband." From the bedroom, I heard a creak. I shouted, "Hello?" When nobody answered, I continued reading. I've gotten away with it. The police don't suspect a thing. There's just one loose thread. The house sitter. 2 weeks after the accident, I found my diary face down, when I always leave it face up. If she went to the authorities, it could ruin everything. My stomach twisted like a towel getting wrung out. But I've got a plan. I'll hide my diary in the walk-in closet and pretend to leave. Then, when she goes looking for it, I'll close the door and fly to Malibu. The door jams and can't be opened from the inside. I've taken the liberty of installing a signal blocker and even told the pool cleaner to take a few weeks off. My stomach twisted even further. She'll never get out alive. When I return, I'll dispose of the diary, then call the police. Easy peasy. Before I could react, the closet door swung shut. Then everything went dark. I didn't know exactly what I was expecting when I went to Mary's house. All I understood was that it wasn't quite a date. But it wasn't quite a casual hangout either. All I really knew about Mary was that she was a spider enthusiast and was sometimes ridiculed at school for it. I didn't like spiders much at all. All those legs and eyes were just ugh. Anyways, I knocked on the door and waited for her to answer. Eventually she opened it up and let me inside. She had pale, almost dead white skin and jet black hair. Said hair came with bangs that covered her eyes, which appeared sunken. She looked rather thin, as if she were barely more than a skeleton covered in skin. She directed me into the parlor, where I sat down at the table. She headed off to the kitchen to fetch some drinks while I waited patiently. It felt like an eternity, but then she came back with the drinks. She set mine down in front of her, but it looked wrong. It looked like red slurry. I took a sip. I tried my almost hardest to not retch and gag, because it smelled and tasted god-awful. Like a rotten meat put in a blender. Then Mary abruptly stood up and said, "Sorry, I forgot about something. I'll be right back." She immediately left the room and entered the kitchen. I decided to sneak around and see what was going on in this creepy place. I stepped out in the main hall, whereupon I heard strange noises coming out of the kitchen door. I tiptoed quietly towards it and heard voices. It was Mary and another person. Perhaps a girl or a very young boy. The other person was whimpering and clearly in pain as they stammered, "Stop it! I don't want to die! It hurts!" I feel sick to my stomach. I realized what she had just tried to give me as a drink. I heaved and ran up the stairs towards the bathroom. I didn't make it up the stairs before I vomited. I heard Mary open and close the kitchen door. I sprinted up the stairs and hid behind the first door I saw. I took around the room I was in. It was a bedroom? Or at least looked like one. Every wall, the floor, the ceiling were covered in spider webs. Walked over to one corner and saw a faintly squirming mass. I tore at the webs and saw a girl's face. She was saying over and over, Don't eat me. I turned around to see Mary, or rather, Mary's upper body jutting out of a massive spider. I couldn't escape before I was bound in her webs and paralyzed by her venom. I shouldn't have walked into her parlor. Have you heard of Walrusexe? It's an app that exploded all over the internet. People were gushing all over the damn thing. Comments describing it as the best thing ever, God's greatest gift to humanity, the most magnificent invention since orgasms, and so on. For all its praise, nobody would ever actually detail what it is. Whenever anyone asked about its purpose or function, they were told, "You'll know when you get it, it's worth it," and so on. I downloaded the app and it was something to say the least. A walrus cartoon-shaped icon. Once I ran the app, it played a bunch of walrus vocalizations and a poorly edited picture of a walrus took over my phone screen. What a joke, I thought to myself. A bloody walrus picture. It did amuse me though. I turned off the app, but the walrus picture remained all over my screen. The background noise died down though. I thought it was a virus or something and chucked my phone onto my bed in anger. To my horror, the walrus picture followed my eyes wherever I looked. I rubbed my eyes. My mind must have been playing tricks on me. The walrus was still there. Walrus here, walrus there, walrus everywhere. No matter where I look, walrus! Walrus this, walrus that, walrus everything. I was going mad. Everything I look at, everything I do, everything is becoming walrus. I Am the Walrus by the Beatles is playing in my head endlessly. I cannot sleep, I cannot dream, I cannot move. I see, nor can I flee. The walrus is out there and it's coming for me. I haven't left the house in a while. People I interact with are now walrus. I cannot take it anymore. Too much walrus. Look at the mirror. I see walrus behind me. I've gained a lot of weight, it seems. Not that I've done much. I only eat and roll around in my own walrus-shaped misery. The walls are colored in the walrus. The ceiling is walrus. Don't you ever download Walrusexe. Ignore the hype. Ignore the barking, whistling. Ignore everything. Never look at the walrus. Never look at the tusk. Never. My jaw's fucking hurting. Like razor blades are pushing their way through my teeth. Oh, God. Fuck. I just looked in the mirror again. Their tusk growing out of my mouth. I'm becoming the walrus. Their tusk is to spread the word. Spread the word about the light at the end of my tusk. I wanted to warn everyone about something that happened to me this last year. It was right around Halloween, if I remember right. I'd posted a story to a popular subreddit and had gotten some traction. I'll cut past the upvotes and comments to one comment in particular. The Roleplay Man. The comments are friendly to begin with. I loved your story. Can we roleplay? I didn't know what he meant. I wasn't very familiar with RPGs or the like, but I thought, why not? It's just fun after all. Hey, thanks for the compliment. Yeah, sure. What do you have in mind? Didn't take long for his response. It's Halloween! You're out trick-or-treating when you notice a gloomy house. Will you walk up the path? Slightly baffled, I peened a response. Yeah, sure. You step up the cracked path. Spiders hang in webs from the bushes. A skeleton springs out in front of you. Okay, I thought, reading the text. You step up to the door. Will you knock? Again, slightly uneased with the dialogue, I replied, yes. Just at that moment, I heard a knock on my door. I'll admit, I jumped. Being Halloween, I grabbed the candy stash and opened the door. No one was there. Believing I had been tricked, I went back to my computer. Okay, I knocked. What next? The house is gloomy. A dark corridor stretches before you. Will you step inside? Flummoxed, I tapped the keys. Yes. The tread of feet tickled my ears. I was home alone. So instantly my hackles rose. I dismissed it, feeling stupid that the roleplay was getting to me. Instead, I focused on the screen. A lone man stares at a computer. Will you reach out to him? I was seriously freaked out at this point. I didn't want to glance behind me. It was all too real. The Roleplay Man seemed to describe my situation completely. The feeling rose. I couldn't resist it. I turned around, feeling that sensation when you run upstairs and think someone will grab your ankle. Thankfully, no one was there. When I turned back, the cursor blinked, waiting for my response. Still freaked out, but again, putting it down as my overactive imagination, I typed. Yes. That's when I felt the touch on my shoulder, and I blacked out. Please beware of the Roleplay Man. It's not what it seems. If you interact with him, it will spell your demise. I had a wife, a family, but not now. That's all gone. All I have is this post to warn you all. So with this information, All I need to ask is one question. Will you roleplay with me? Us kids were told never to go to the house on the hill. At first glance, you can easily see why. It towered over the rest of the town, a lone mansion cloaked in shadow. Compared to the emerald green grass in our lawns, the grass on the hill was brown, dry, wilted. It seemed to spread ever so downwards like a plague. The actual house was long abandoned. I think it was last occupied in 1965. Since then, it had been up for sale, but the sign was rusted and the paint was faded, the words barely visible. By now, everyone had accepted that it was best to leave the house on the hill alone. But I was curious. I always dreamed of going in there like an adventurer, digging up buried treasure deep in the house. And the more I gazed towards the house in the distance, the stronger my urge. So one night, I gathered up my courage and sneaked outside. As I climbed up the hill, lightning suddenly arched forward from the clouds and struck the house, bathing the house in an eerie glow. Briefly, I could glimpse the roof, tattered and torn, the shattered glass of the window, and the creaky wooden floor swinging in the wind. I darted into the house, and the door slammed shut behind me. Despite the fact that I was now inside, the cold bit my cheeks. I shivered and wrapped my jacket around me tighter. The light stretched out of my phone in a long, white arm, illuminating furniture covered in dust. I swung the light around and was greeted by a stuffed bear. Its eyes were wild, and it was grinning, showing all of its teeth. Then the light flickered and went out. My phone went dead. That was strange. I swore I'd charged my phone last night. Get out! The voice echoed through the house, and something dark flapped in front of my face. I jumped and tripped on a piece of loose floorboard. I fell forward, arms flailing and grabbing at empty air. Then I fell on my face. Something sharp and jagged pierced one of my eyeballs, and I could see blood trickling out and staining the floor crimson. Then I thought no more. When I came to, there was a beeping of machines, and the world was bleached white. I'm very disappointed in you, Danny. You gave us a heart attack last night. My father's grave words brought me back to my senses. He explained somberly how worried they were about me and how they found me passed out in the house, soaked in my own blood. Their wounded faces through my good eye twisted my heart into knots. No apology I made was enough. Finally, they shook their heads and left the room. The lights flickered, went out. I gulped. Your parents were not the only ones who hated you were in my house last night, you know. John noticed a tall man across the lake. He waved to John, but John didn't wave back. Roughly 12 minutes later, John gets up to head to his car. On the way home, stopped at a light, there's a pedestrian resembling the man at the lake. He waves at John, but John doesn't wave back. He pulls into his driveway to find who's undoubtedly the man from the lake, waving at him from across the street. John, again, doesn't wave back. Later that night, he gets a wave from a random account on Facebook. John doesn't respond. He wakes up the following morning to encounter the tall man at his door. He waves at John through the window. John waves back. The tall man smiles and leaves. When John got to the lake, the tall man was waiting at the other end again. When he waves at John, he waves back. Once again, the tall man smiled and left. Hours later, when John leaves, he encounters the tall man while stopped at a light. He waves at John, and John waves back. He smiled and kept moving. He was across the street again when John got back to his driveway. He waved. John waved back. That night, John gets a wave from the same Facebook account from the night prior. This time, John sends a wave back. When he wakes up, the tall man is standing over his bed, waving and smiling, assuming he'll wave back. John doesn't, as he's frightened. The tall man frowns and leaves. When John got to the lake that day, the tall man was not there. On John's way back, the tall man is not at the stoplight. He's not across the street from his driveway when John gets back. And John doesn't get a wave on his Facebook account. This time, he doesn't wake up the following morning. Her eyes were fixated on the bright little screen that was in front of her face, her hands trembling, beads of sweat slowly forming on her forehead. The bold, tiny letters seemed to mesh together as she read the message over and over again. Her brain turns to a pink, messy sludge as she tries to figure out what to type on the mini keyboard at her fingertips. Her eyes readjust on the letters in front of her. Unknown. Why won't you turn the lights out already? I've been waiting patiently under your bed for an hour. I want to see your insides already.